Welcome to Faith and Work, the podcast where we explore what it looks like to live out your faith in the middle of our everyday lives. Today's episode is a little bit different and a whole lot of fun. I'm taking you with me to my trip to New York City, a trip that has been on my heart and in my mind for years. It's filled with history, adventure, and some unforgettable moments. From watching my husband light up in the middle of a museum, to seeing parts of Central Park I've only ever seen in movies, to standing on Ellis Island where my own family once stepped onto American soil for the very first time. This was a trip I'll never forget. But here's what surprised me the most. In the middle of one of the busiest cities in the world, God did not just show me how to explore, He reminded me how to rest. If you're in a season where life feels full and busy and maybe overwhelming, this episode is for you. Because at the end, we're going to talk about what we can do right now to find a moment of rest and how you can make space for it in your life today. Let's dive in. Welcome to Faith and Work. I am so excited to share this episode with you, mostly because I get to talk about a really fun trip we just got to take, a trip to New York City. I have been dreaming about going to New York City for such a long time, and it still feels like a dream that we had the opportunity to go. So today's episode, it's fun. We'll end with a biblical challenge and a spiritual truth, but I really would love to talk to you about some of the highlights of our trip, some of the amazing things. At one point, towards the end of the trip, I was talking to our friends that we traveled with, and I said, I wonder if we could ever go to New York and just stay in one borough. I was thinking about an easier way to maybe bring the boys back one day. And then I looked on a map and realized the whole 3 days we stayed in one borough. And I thought we had been super adventurous and gone all over the city. And we did go all over the city. But even in going all over the city for 3 days and taxi rides and subways and everything, walking what felt like miles and miles and miles, we still just stayed in Manhattan. There's so much to see. There's so much to do. So today's episode, I want to highlight our 3 favorite parts of the trip. And then I'll go through a little bit more detail. If there's anything that you are wanting to know more about for your own trip to New York, I'd be happy to send over any of the places that we've gone or share any links with you. We had a wonderful experience, so always happy to share anything that we learned. But I honestly got a lot of our tips from our friend, Tim and Annabelle. Tim was a guest last week on the podcast. We recorded that episode months ago, so it was kind of funny that it aired right after we came back. So that was kind of a cool timing on that episode. But Annabelle, Tim's wife, really helped to plan a lot of the trip because she's been so many times and she has family up in that area. So that really helped. But she shared a lot of really practical tips. A lot of friends that are from that part of the country shared some really cool practical things. The most important one being to wear comfortable shoes. And that proved to be a very, very helpful piece of advice. I think over the course of our time in New York, we walked close to 60,000 miles if you include our travel days in the airports. It would not 60,000 miles, 60,000 miles, 60,000 steps. So it felt like 60,000 miles. We walked 60,000 steps. So that was just so much fun to go explore that much of the city. And that was not even walking everywhere. That was still taking subways and Ubers and taxi rides. So such a fun trip. But our 3 top favorite things that we got to do, I'll start with David's favorite. I think one of the really cool things about taking a history teacher to New York is you get kind of an extra tour guide, which was so fun. And I will never forget seeing David's face light up when we were in the American Museum of Natural History, and David's face when he saw the Mayan ruins. And he walked over to that display and he's looking at all these different pieces and these relics that he talks about in class. And then he goes over to the Incas and he's like, oh, Carol, take a picture of this. This is amazing. And he is just going on and on about facts that were not even on the display because there was no room to put all the things that he has studied for so long. It was so neat to see his face light up. When we first got to the museum, I think he was a little bit disappointed because they tell you to start at the museum on the very top floor, on the fourth floor. So we went to the fourth floor, but it was mostly animals, and that's where a lot of young kids were. So we got to the floor, we're walking around looking at the dinosaurs and the whales and the sea creatures. And I said, "Is this what you thought it was going to be?" And he was like, "Well, no, I thought it'd be a little bit different." And anyway, we finally got down to the second and first floor where a lot more of the exhibits that he was more interested in. And they had a huge, beautiful display about China, and they had some amazing displays about the Middle East. They had a really cool area, the Hall of African Mammals. That's where Dexter was from the movie. If you grew up watching Night in the Museum, I was very excited to go to the museum because I felt like it was watching my childhood come to life. I was very disappointed that they did not have Theodore Roosevelt on the horse, and it didn't look like Robin Williams. That was a little disappointing, but David was there for more important things like the Mayan ruins and the Inca ruins. So he was very, very happy. But it was so fun to see his face light up when he saw these pieces of history that he teaches so much. The museum was kind of a late add onto the schedule. We didn't know if we would have time to do it. So we literally bought the tickets the day that we got to go to the museum. It was our last full day in New York. And that was such a God thing because it meant so much to David, and we really didn't know if we could fit it in, and we did. We did spend about 3 hours there. And if you were going to really look at all the displays, you probably need to plan on 4 to 5 hours. There were sections that we just did not have time to go through. We had to kind of get on to the next thing that we had already planned. And so if you really want to go, if you have young kids and they want to go more explore the animal sections of the museum, I would highly recommend more time. There was just so much to see and do. Unbelievable. So glad we got to do that. My second favorite thing, I was really afraid this would be cheesy. It felt like a really touristy thing to do, but I've always seen the carriage rides in Central Park and seen pictures of it or seen videos of it or just, it seems like a very New York tourist thing to do. And so we were coming back from the museum and we had some time before going to dinner. And so we thought, okay, if we're going to do it, now's our time to do it. And it was the coldest day of our trip. And we walked over to one of the carriages and he had an opening and we did. It was like a 45-minute ride. So it lasted a lot longer than I thought it was going to. I thought it was going to be like a quick 15-minute loop, but it was a 45-minute ride. Our driver told us so many amazing facts about Central Park. I had no idea that Central Park is often referred to as the world's largest outdoor museum. There's over 140 pieces of art and statues that are outside in Central Park. It was unbelievable. We saw the statue of Balto. That was another movie I grew up watching. Love the story of Balto. And then, of course, David's right beside me telling me all the things about Balto. But then there was another dog, and he's going to kill me for forgetting the name of the other dog. What was that other dog's name? Anyway, there was another sled dog that actually ran longer than Balto did. And another part of the race. Anyway, there's a whole thing about that. But there was so many really cool pieces of history. There's this whole area where they played chess that was in several like famous movies, but there's also famous chess players that David also knew because he's a chess player. But there we got to see that and where they played these like historic games of chess. If you ever watch the show Friends, the Friends fountain that they have in the opening scene, we got to see the Friends fountain. I have our picture beside it. The bridge where in Elf they have the snowball fight. We got to see that. Like there's just so many cool pieces of movie history that happened in Central Park, but also just the amazing statues. The guy that started Webster's Dictionary, we got his picture of his statue there. amazing, amazing outdoor museum. If we ever make it back to New York, I would love to actually just go and maybe go when it's a little bit warmer and go explore Central Park a little bit more and really just have the time to walk around and see it all because there were so many things on the outside that we were riding around in a carriage and taking pictures as fast as we could and trying to listen to everything he was saying while staying under the blanket because it was so cold, but amazing, amazing experience. We had a wonderful carriage driver who told us so many stories and told us who lived in certain houses. And there's certain sections of Central Park that are known for being old money or new money or whatever. And he told us all about where certain landmarks were, where certain buildings were, movies that were made in certain buildings. It's just I felt like we had a tour of Central Park, but we also got a little bit of a tour of the skyline of New York. We weren't even really near some of the buildings, but because they're so tall, he told us who they were built by, what they were used for, just so many amazing facts that I really had not anticipated learning. And Dave and I both really love going to new cities and getting to explore and getting to learn new things about the city. So that was something I did not expect, was not on the original travel plan. We just thought if we have time, we'll fit that in. We had a free hour or two before dinner. We fit it in really quick. And I'm so, so glad we did. But my number one favorite thing that we got to do in New York was going to Ellis Island. So 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, my great grandparents came through Ellis Island and they came from Czechoslovakia back in the early 1900s. And it was an honor to get to step off of the ferry and walk onto Ellis Island. It felt a little bit like sacred ground. I know that might maybe sound a little bit dramatic, but when your ancestors came from there, and then my grandfather was actually stationed in Germany right after World War II. And he came back to the States through Ellis Island. So my grandfather, grandmother, and mom, their names are also processed. When you go to Ellis Island, you type in your family's names. All of their names come through on the computers as being processed through Ellis Island. My mom was born in Germany, but when they brought her to the States, she came through Ellis Island. So just an amazing family connection there to that place. And it was such a unique experience. So the story goes that my great grandmother actually came over as an illegal immigrant. She came over under her best friend's name. So I know right now that's a hot topic with a lot of people, but 100 years ago, things were a little bit different. But my grandmother's best friend was supposed to come to America. And the night before the trip, she got really scared and she just chickened out and said, I can't do it. I'm too scared. And my great grandmother took her passport and came over under her name because back in the day, there were not pictures on the passports. So no one knew she came over under a false name. And she came over under her best friend's name. I cannot even imagine how scared she was. I can't imagine how many times she probably had to lie to get in. And then once she did, she changed her name back to her real name. And it all worked out. I don't know how it all happened back then, but it all worked out. But I was overwhelmed with the Statue of Liberty when you pull into the harbor and you see the statue there. And then just going to get to walk around the museum there and hear these stories about it. But seeing the original flame that was in the museum, it was just such I don't know. It felt like such an honor to see this piece of American history that's so old and so iconic. Something we noticed that we'd never noticed before is we always say there stands Lady Liberty in the harbor, right? Or there's songs about there stands a lady. But really, when you look at the full Statue of Liberty and you walk all the way around, she's not standing, she's walking. I don't know why that was very fascinating for David and I both, but it's like Liberty is always on the move. If you walk all the way around her, you can see that her back foot is up and she's moving forward. That was just really amazing to us. We really enjoyed our time there. If I had more time, I would have spent more time. We thought that our tickets included going up into the Statue of Liberty, but they didn't. And it must have been a really small option, but Annabelle and I were together when we booked him, and we both thought we clicked on that part. So I'm not sure what on the website. I'll have to go back and look at it. But if you do go to the Statue of Liberty, just make sure if you want to go up inside the statue, you have to book that ahead of time when you buy your ticket. There's not really a way to change that and add that on while you're there. We had plenty of time to look around the museum and then go over to Ellis Island. So it's kind of one ferry that takes you to the Statue of Liberty and then takes you to Ellis Island. I cannot wait to take my boys when they're teenagers. That to me was my favorite part of the trip, getting to see it and walk into those halls and see where they were processed, to see how the island grew over time. It was used in World War II as a hospital. It was just an unbelievably, I don't know, it felt familiar because I've studied it so much and I've seen documentaries about Ellis Island. But it was a part of my history, part of my family's history and heritage that felt very sacred to have the opportunity to go and to see that. But what does going to New York have to do with faith and work? Why are we talking about it on the podcast? We took a weekend trip as a couple with another couple. Why would I talk about that on the podcast? Well, for a couple of reasons, but the biggest one being that taking a trip on the weekend is a way that we can rest. It's a way that we can mentally rest. And there are different types of rest. There's mental rest. There's our soul rest. There's resting at the feet of Jesus. There's sleeping and resting. There's all different types of rest. And sometimes rest looks like a trip. For you, maybe you're not in a season where you can take a trip. It might be a season where you need to look at your calendar and see what you can just mark off for this coming weekend. Maybe you need to say no to a social obligation and take a moment to rest. Maybe you need to turn the TV off and get some sleep. Maybe you need to turn your notifications off on your phone and just rest your eyes and rest your brain. Last year, when my mom was really sick, I had a doctor ask me how I was resting my brain. And I kind of just looked at him and I said, well, I mean, I read books to rest. And he said, what kind of books do you read? And I told him, and he said, what happens after you read those books? And I said, well, I usually get ideas and I write them down and, and they motivate me and they encourage me and they da 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 da. And I went on. And he said, Carol, look at your body language right now. He said, your arms are going everywhere. He said, your body language is almost aggressive. And he said, those types of books are helping to expand your knowledge and your learning and your growing, but you're not resting. He said, you need to find some ways to rest your brain, whether that's yoga or meditation or prayer or walking. You need to find ways to rest your brain. And he was right. And I've tried really hard in the last year to implement more brain rest, but there's all different types of rest that our bodies need. Did you know that in the Bible, the idea of rest is talked about over 400 times? I think if God inspired the Word of God and he talked about rest over 400 times, I think it's important that you and I listen to that and we really pay attention to that. In Genesis, we see God creating the heavens and the earth. We see a detail of what happens every single day. And then it says on the seventh day, God rested. He has an example of him resting in the very beginning. And he shows us by leading by example of how important rest is. This idea of rest is not just a good idea for us now and a good idea throughout the Bible. But if you look at the time that the children of Israel were in the Babylonian captivity, they were there for 70 years. And if you look at that time of 70 years, that was an exact correlation for how long the children of Israel did not rest the land. Because in Leviticus, God told them to rest the land. He told them to rest every part of their practice was different parts of rest. And he said, Sabbath is so important. It's even important that you rest the land every 7 years. And they did not do it. And if you want to read more about that, you can read that in 2nd Chronicles and then also in Leviticus 26. But they were in captivity for 70 years, which is a direct correlation to how long they did not rest the land. There's several articles that I read that highlighted how important it is to rest, to reduce our stress, to improve how productive you can be. Rest can actually reduce chronic pain. It can improve your immunity in your body. It can actually help you have a stronger heart. If you are listening to this and you're like, Carol, I can't rest. I can't go on a trip. I can't go to bed early. I can't sleep in late. I can't do this. I can't do that. I want to encourage you to look at your calendar and find some rest. Because friend, if you don't take some time to find some rest, your body's going to shut down. Your mind's going to shut down. I want you to start with 4 hours, whether it be a Saturday afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, a Friday evening. Start with 4 hours and work your way up from there if you can, but just start with 4 hours. There was a season several years ago when I was going back to college, taking college classes, and it was absolutely exhausting. And there were times when I had to submit an assignment late because I had to go to bed. I had stayed up and I was looking at the computer screen and I thought, I have read the same thing 3 times and I can't tell you what I just read. My brain was absolutely exhausted. It was shut down and I could not read anymore. I couldn't comprehend anything else. My brain was just done. It was max capacity. Nothing else could fit in that day. I needed to sleep and recharge. I want you to start with your calendar with 4 hours. I would love to hear what you're going to do in those 4 hours. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook. I would love to hear from you. But think about what you're going to do in those 4 hours. Maybe for you, it's taking a walk in the park. Maybe you're going to do some yoga. Maybe you're going to listen to a Bible reading app. I love listening to the Bible on audio. There's just something about it, listening to it in someone else's voice. Sometimes listening to it in my own voice or just listening to it and reading it silently in my office. I can get easily distracted by my own thoughts. But when someone else is reading it to me, it helps me to stay focused. But maybe go on a walk in the woods and just listen to the Psalms. Maybe journal. Sometimes I like to write out prayers back to God. That is relaxing to me. Getting a cup of hot coffee or hot tea and just taking a deep breath, learning how to take deep breaths and breathe deeply. Sometimes in our rush of the world and our rush of life and trying really hard to be a committed wife and a committed mother and trying really hard to bring everything I've got to my team every day and fully commit to everything they need. It's really exhausting sometimes. And you've got to think about some times that you can unwind, you can rest, you can turn off your notifications, and you can give your brain a rest and give yourself permission to not be on duty. God did not create you to see how much you could get done in a day. He is not disappointed when you don't get all the things done on your list. He's not. He loves you. He cares about you. And Ecclesiastes talks about enjoying the fruit of your labor. This is the gift. It says this is the portion to enjoy the fruit of what God has given you. If God has given you the ability to go on a trip, then go on a trip. If for you, it looks like maybe taking a long lunch break and going and getting a cup of coffee and unwinding for a minute, there's something about closing your eyes and taking a deep breath and just breathing out a prayer that really helps to refocus my brain sometimes. Ask yourself some questions. If you're in a season where you need to rest, I want to really, really encourage you to ask yourself some questions on why are you striving so hard? Is it to push for a deadline? Is it to prove anything to anybody? Dave and I were just watching a cooking show. We love this certain cooking show. It's Tournament of Champions. If you're a Food Network fan, we love Tournament of Champions. But one thing that struck me about almost every single chef that they interview is that they're almost all trying to prove something to somebody. And to a certain degree, I can understand that. But the other night we were watching it and I paused it and I said, babe, there's only one winner. And they're all trying to prove it to somebody. And it's kind of sad in a way. It kind of made me sad. One of them was trying to prove it to his mom that he could do it. And it showed a picture of him and his mom there, and his mom had cancer. And I'm doing this to prove it to my mom that her hard work wasn't in vain all those years. I'm doing this to prove it to my mom. And I wanted somebody to let her reach through the TV and be like, buddy, you don't have to prove anything to your mom. Your mom loves you. Your mom doesn't need you to prove anything to her. You, in her eyes, you're on the Food Network. You've already made it. You're doing amazing things. And sometimes we work really, really hard to prove somebody wrong, to prove somebody right, to prove something to somebody, maybe just to yourself. But I want you to ask yourself, if you're finding yourself in a season where you need the rest, what's stopping you from resting? What are you trying to prove? And what can you do right now to plan a moment of rest? Plan at least 4 hours to start rest. Maybe during those 4 hours, look forward to something you can enjoy. Maybe a meal that you really enjoy, a favorite meal. Maybe a walk with a best friend. Really think about how you can practice rest. Typically, our rest looks like sleeping in on Saturday mornings. It looks like family brunch. David makes the best brunch. He is just such a great cook. I am blessed with a husband that is amazing in the kitchen. And I love to bake. I enjoy cooking okay, but he is really good at it. He's an amazing, amazing chef. If teaching ever doesn't work out for him, and he's a great teacher too, but if teaching ever doesn't work out for him, he could probably have a whole second career as a chef because he's just really good at it. But anyway, I want you to think about a moment of rest that you can plan. I want to hear about it. Let me hear from you. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to me on Instagram, on Facebook. I also have a website, carolevansministries.com. You can listen to all the podcasts there. You can read articles. We're growing that website, so keep checking back in. You can also subscribe to any upcoming events and products that I am working on, hopefully launching later this year. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you can sign up for more details on the website. But I want to hear from you. I want to hear how you're planning your rest. Maybe it's a Sunday afternoon walk. Maybe it's spending extra long in the coffee shop, taking a deep breath, reading, not doing anything. Practice not having a screen in front of you. What does that look like for you? What would it look like? What would those 4 hours look like? If you could plan 4 hours of rest, what would it look like? Yeah, I want to hear from you on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook. Let me hear from you. I have something special I want to send you to the first person who reaches out to me and tells me how they're going to spend their 4 hours of rest, and I want to hear when you're going to do it. As we wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with this simple challenge. Find 4 hours of rest this week, not to catch up, not to be productive, but to truly rest mentally, physically, and spiritually. Because you were never meant to run at full speed all the time. Rest is not something that you earn, it's something that God gives. He freely gives it. He wants you to take it. A Bible teacher that I greatly respect, Lisa Harper, often says that Jesus' ministry was at the speed of 3 miles an hour. Think about that. This week, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you are going to do for your 4 hours of rest. And I want to know when you're going to take it. Reach out to me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook and let me know. I truly cannot wait to hear how you are going to rest this week. The first person that reaches out to me will get a special package and gift. So if you are the first person, I'll let you know. I'll get your address and I'll get that in the mail to you. Don't forget to join next week. I'll be joined by a dear, dear friend, Mia Godfrey, who was also an immigrant, just like my great-grandparents were, but she was an immigrant from Romania. Mia shares what her life was like growing up in Romania and what coming to America looked like, finding her first job, navigating all of that, learning a new language, learning how to drive. There was so much that she learned. She's someone that I greatly respect. We have a deep friendship over the last 15 years. I cannot wait for you to meet her. It's a powerful conversation about our faith, having courage, and stepping into the great unknown. Until next week, wherever God has you, live with purpose, work with excellence, and remember to rest in Him. I'll see you next week.